Hey guys, I wanna bring you today my Warlock Aether Ray build using the Black Flame set. After a bunch of theory crafting and min-maxing, I'm now at a point where I'm really happy with the performance. It can clear and phase tank pretty much everything in Shattered Realm 80, and I haven't tried it yet, but I bet it can go to 90 and above, especially with a more defensive devotion setup. What I really love is the look of the conversion to chaos and vitality damage. It's just badass and perfect for a warlock class. Also, the self-heal we get from our items and the Occultist skill tree really pushes our survivability to another level. I will go first over the skills, so you know why and what we are going to use, and afterwards I'm going over the items and I will show you the boosts and benefits they provide to those skills. Starting with the Occultist class. We are having a maxed out Sigil of Consumption. Besides the Aether Ray, this will be one of our main damage dealing sources. It deals a bunch of vitality and chaos damage and provides healing. 1 point in Doombolt, it deals okay damage, but it can also be used to trigger an devotion skill. 1 point in the Solar Switchfire buff, and then as many points as possible in Second Right. Putting points in here gives us a higher damage increase in comparison to putting points into here, and it also gives us a nice boost to our vitality resistance. We max out Possession, it gives a huge damage boost. Damage Absorption, Chaos Resist, and even Skill Disruption Protection. Bloody Pox will give us another skill that can trigger a devotion effect. Put 1 point in every skill of it. It reduces the enemy's health. This one lowers the offensive ability a bit. And the last one gives a chance to confuse the enemy. 1 point in Curse of Frailty, so we can trigger another devotion effect. The reduced movement speed it provides can be useful, but the next skill, Vulnerability, is better, reducing the defensive ability and reducing the vitality resist of our enemies. 1 point in Blood of Dreek, we can use it as another heal, and it even increases the offensive ability a bit. But more important is the aspect of the Guardian. I put 5 points into it. It provides some vitality damage, but more importantly, physical and poison resist, and we can keep it up all the time. So with it, we can easily overcap our poison and acid resist. In the Arcanist class, I put 1 point in this buff. It gives us some energy leech and regeneration, 3 points in Overload, mainly for the offensive ability, but it also gives us some ether resistance, and 1 point into elemental balance. 12 out of 12 in Mirror, so it has a pretty short cooldown. It will be a really important skill to survive high damage spikes. Also 12 out of 12 in Sphere of Protection for the damage absorption it provides. And Conversion will give us a huge energy leech and massive reduction in all kinds of debuffs. Aether Ray is our main damaging ability, so we want to max it out. We will be using the side node here to convert the damage into chaos and vitality. And also max out Disintegration, since the lightning damage will become vitality and the 45% crit damage will give us a huge DPS boost. 12 out of 12 in Inner Focus. For the Spirit and offensive ability, the Spirit will increase the overall damage, energy and energy regeneration. And the offensive stat will increase our chance to hit and crit. 10 out of 10 in Arcane Will. It triggers at 75% health, so you can get it all the time. The damage boost is nice, but getting another 200 defensive ability is even better. I put 1 point in here. With this I get my cast speed to 200%, and with the skill energy cost reduction and all the other reductions I get, I pretty much never need to use energy potions. But depending on your gear rolls, you might want to put a few more points into here to max out your casting speed, or if you have trouble with your energy bar. You could, for example, take a couple of points out of here and put them into here. Lastly, Fabric of Reality 12 out of 12 for a nice overall damage boost. For our devotions, I have two setups. The one I'm currently using is the all-round setup, which I have used to clear Shattered Realm 80, but I also have another one if you want to be more tanky and fight the super bosses or go really high Shattered Realm layers. Starting out with my normal setup, the three devotions we want to reach are Revenant, the Dying God, and Abomination. Okay, let me show you now in the build calculator the devotion route I would take. First, 1 point in red, then 3 points in here, 1 point in green, then max out Spider. Now we have access to this devotion, which gives us a lot of chaos damage and a skill that reduces chaos resist on enemies. We bind it to the Aether Ray. Next, we want to reach Behemoth, so we put 1 point into blue and then max out Imp. The fire and ether damage will be converted to chaos and vitality with some of our equipment. Bind Sigil of Consumption to it. Now max out Behemoth and bind any permanent buff to it. The health increase and healing we get from Behemoth will be really important once you reach around Shattered Realm 70 or 75. Before that, you could use those points and put them into a Bat or Fiend instead. As you can see, they give the same completion bonus. But with Behemoth, you will be really putting your survivability to the next level. Now we want to reach Revenant. You can take 1 point out of green and put 4 points into red to unlock Revenant. At this point, you can max it out, and with the constellation bonus we get, it can support itself, so we can take the points back out of red. Revenant will give us Energy Leech, which is always great for a caster class. It also gives us some health and life drain, some casting speed here, and the final one reduces target's movement speed, but more importantly, reduces their resistance. We will bind it to Solael's Flame. At this point, you can either go for Abomination or Dying God. Both will give you a damage increasing buff. Since it will be faster to reach Abomination, I will go with it first. We need 5 more points in green, so either go with Raven or Fox. I chose Fox for the last node. It gives me 6% more attack damage converted to health. Now I can put 5 points into here. I will bind this skill either to Bloody Pox or Curse of Frailty. Since they have no cooldown, I can spam them all the time and easily trigger the effect with a 20% chance on hit. We need 10 more points in blue to reach Dying God, so I put 3 points in Eel. It gives us some defensive stats, movement speed and defensive ability. And I put 4 points in here. It gives us a little more damage, health and resistances. Now we can reach Dying God and get even more chaos and vitality damage. We will bind Hungering Void to Bloody Pox or Curse of Frailty, depending on what you chose before. So we can also just spam it and trigger the 33% chance on attack. Okay, let me show you now my more defensive setup. You can see with those two buffs active, we are at 2500 and 1700. So when we go to our devotions now, I would take out the points in Abomination, which means we also don't need all of the green points. So we can remove Spider and Fox. I would put them into this one. With the points in here, we can reach this devotion. This will give us a lot more defensive stats. And the last skill will reduce our cooldowns. I would bind it to either Curse of Reality or Bloody Pox, since it's again 20% chance on attack. With the cooldown we get from here, we will also reduce the cooldown of our mirror by a lot, which means we can use it much more often and get a 100 damage absorption from it. The last 3 points you can spend wherever you like. For example, in Hound, you will get a lot more armor. Now with those two buffs active, we are at 2700 and 2000. Plus all of these other defensive stats we get from here, like reduction in burn duration, reduced entrapment and reflected damage, chance to avoid projectiles and melee attacks, and so on. I would use this setup if you wanna go for the super bosses, or if you want to go Shattered Realm 80 to 90 or even higher than that. For our items, we are using the full Black Flame set. The set bonus gives us chaos and vitality damage, a lot of health, cooldown reduction, and the last one gives us points into Aether Ray and the Sigil. And it's also buffing the Sigil up with a lot of chaos damage. With the 4th set piece, we also get a new skill called Ritual Circle. It gives us a huge boost to physical resist, which means staying stationary and face tanking will be much easier as long as it is active. The skill energy cost reduction is great if you are not having the best items and enchants yet to keep your energy up, and the same is said for the casting speed. But the best part is the damage modifier we get. You can see the damage now. After we cast it, we nearly get 40k. You just have to get used to casting it below your character, since it will be cast wherever your cursor is. Most of the weapon stats are self-explanatory, but what I want to mention is that the fire to chaos conversion also applies to our devotions. So, for example, the fire damage from our Aether Fire gets converted to chaos, and the same applies also to the Eldritch fire damage. For the component, I went with the symbol of Solael to increase the chaos damage more, get some energy absorption, but more importantly, get another active skill, which will be very useful to trigger devotion effects since it has no cooldown. It will also reduce the vitality and chaos resist of our enemies further. For the augment, I went with Dreek's Terror, which you can buy from the Cult of Dreek's vendor once you reach Revered. So, when starting the Forgotten Gods DLC, I would also side first with the Cult of Dreek, since they not only have a very good enchant for your one-handed items, but also for your rings and amulets. Alternatively, if you want to be more defensive, you could choose this one from the Cult of Solael, or this one from the Melmouth Resistance. The helm gives us points in Destruction and Disintegration, which are both our main damaging skills. And we get a modifier for our Aether Ray, which reduces the enemy's damage for 18%. For the component, I chose Prismatic Diamond for the health increase and energy absorption. But if you can keep your energy up, you could exchange it for Sacred Blading, Titan Blading, or Living Armor, depending on what resistance you are lacking. For the augments on all of your armor parts, you want to choose whichever resistance you are lacking. This will mostly depend on the rolls on your green items. The orb of the Black Flame is just amazing. We get a lot of offensive ability, increased energy regeneration, cooldown reduction, and we get another 10% attack damage converted to health to our sigil, which should bring it up to 43%. Also, all the fire damage get converted to chaos damage here. The skill it grants is also very interesting. The black mark reduces resists, attack and cast speed, and even deals some damage. It triggers on crits though. That's another reason why I like to get a good amount of offensive ability. For the component, I'm using Riftstone. Itself provides a little bit of chaos damage, but more importantly it grants us another buff, Void Weapons. This will increase our chaos damage further and slows the enemy's attacks. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this slow debuff stacks with the Black Mark debuff, which also reduces attack and cast speed, and we even get from the Black Orb itself 14% reduced attack speed retaliation, which pretty much means if an enemy hits you, they will have a 14% reduced attack speed for 3 seconds. For the augment, I'm using the Dreek's Terror again. The last part of the Black Flame set, the shoulders, boost our sigil and ray further. And the Aether to Chaos conversion will give us the same benefits as before in regards to the devotions. So for example, converting the Aether damage from Aether Fire to Chaos damage. For the components I'm using Living Armor, since I want to get an armor absorption somewhere between 80 to 90%. For the gloves I'm using the Mythical Aether Reach. The Aether damage it provides isn't really important for this build, but we will get also some vitality damage, a lot of casting speed, and more importantly, +2 in Aether Ray and Disintegration, which will be very important to get it up to 26 and 22. It also boosts our Aether Ray with a little bit more of vitality and ether damage and skill energy cost reduction. For the components, I'm using Restless Remains to get more life leech and casting speed. For boots, I'm using the Voidwalker foot pads, since they give us +2 in both Sigil of Consumption and Destruction, which is very important to get them both up to 22, which is the max you can have. The Voidwalker skill can also be a nice little defense. For components, I'm using the Mark of Mogdrogen for the health increase and movement speed. For the belt, I'm using the Dark Place Ammo Belt. The crit damage and chaos damage is nice, but what I really like here is the +1 in all Occultist skills. I used the Sash of the Bloodlord before, which is a great choice with all of the damage conversion and spirit increase, but after trying them both out, I think the +1 in all Occultist skills is just better, but damage wise you perform nearly the same either way. For the component I'm using the Ukdenbok leather, so I can get a nice overcap in bleeding and poison and acid when I activate my buff. For pants, we want to use any Alexander's leg guards, mainly for the +3 to Disintegration, which will allow us to max it out at 22 and provides a huge damage boost. But since it's a green item, it can give us a variety of resists, especially the elusive reduced stun duration. I chose this one, which also gives me some health and offensive ability, but you can get better rolls probably with chaos damage on it. It would increase your overall damage a bit, but in my opinion, you should take more attention on defenses here and use it to overcap or max out your lacking resists and get things like health, defense or offensive ability on it. For the component I'm using Ancient Armor Plate for the armor increase and armor absorption. In the chest slot I'm using the Vestments of Severed Faith. The stats are nice and the boost to Doombolt and conversion is a good addition, but the real reason why I chose it is the buff it provides. It gives a nice damage boost and ether resist. If I want more defense, in this case mainly armor, I would switch it to the Void Soul armor. With it I can get over 2000 armor rating. For the component I'm using Titan Blading. The first ring will be Void Heart. It gives us +2 in Disintegration, which is important to get it up to 22, and it also gives us more fire to chaos conversion. The curse it provides on crit is also great, decreasing vitality and chaos resists. For the component, Runebound Topaz. For the defense, health increase and reduced stun duration. And the augment I mentioned before, also from the cult of Dreek, the Osiris Temper, increasing our chaos damage, offensive and defensive ability. For the second ring, my first choice is the Ring of Basti. It boosts our sigil, but what I really like is the granted skill, Eye of Basti. They will swirl around your character, dealing great AoE damage, whilst you are stationary casting Aether Ray, which will be very helpful when you get swarmed by a bunch of enemies, and they can also trigger on-hit effects. For the component and augment, the same as before. As for other ring choices, the Curse Bearer has a nice skill which reduces enemies' attack and cast speed, also vitality resist, and decreases their health regeneration by 100%. The Combustion Band also has overall nice stats and gives us a skill that reduces chaos resist. The Signet of the Damned gives you 5% more health leech and triggers another Sigil of Consumption. But this isn't the same one from your skill tree. It just has similar benefits, like dealing AoE damage and healing you. The Sigil of the Depraved gives you a skill that deals decent damage and reduces the enemy's max health. For our amulet, we are using the Essence of the Grim Dawn, which gives a bunch of benefits to our Aether Ray and grants us another passive skill that can stun enemies. For components, I'm using the Seal of Annihilation. If you look at it what it does, it's just really strong, giving you energy cost reduction, reduce enemies' health, reduce their offensive and defensive ability, and health regeneration, and even giving you some casting speed. For the augment, I'm using the same as on the rings, Osiris Temper. For the metal, I'm using a Warlock mark. It boosts our sigil damage and gives +3 to destruction. And since it's a green item, we can get a variety of stats, like offensive, defensive ability, health, and different resists. As you can see, I farmed a lot of them, and you can get a variety of stats on them. For the component, I'm using Arcane Spark for the energy leech, regeneration, and the offensive ability. And for the augment and our movement speed ability, I'm using the Rune of the Wretch Desires. Since this is a caster class and the Aether Ray has a good reach, I really like to use a disengage ability, not a teleport or a melee one. When health gets really low or you get swarmed, you can just use it to disengage and keep casting your Aether Ray. As an alternative to this metal, you could use this one, which increases the ray damage a bit, but you will lose the sigil damage. So overall the damage performs very similar. You will just lose out on a lot of different amazing stats that the green item can provide. So my first choice would be the Warlock mark. Lastly, for the relic, I'm using Serenity. It's just amazing for survivability, and the +1 to all skills is extremely good. But if you aren't farming high level realms or bosses, you could use those relics instead. For consumables, what I recommend is of course this one to increase your health and energy, the same for this one, the Elixir of the Void to increase your vitality and chaos damage, and this one to increase your offensive and defensive ability. What I also like to use is Lifestealer Oil for a little bit more vitality damage and attack damage converted to health. But if you are just starting out and you have only very few materials, you could use Hungering Oil instead, which also gives you 6% attack damage converted to health. You can buy it at the Quartermaster in Barrowholm. Another consumable I recommend is the Rovari Oil, which has a chance to reduce enemies' max health and gives you more vitality damage. You can buy it at the old Arcovia camp at the Quartermaster. And at the Homestead Quartermaster, You might want to buy some Courageous Tinctures for the defensive ability and armor increase. Now let's have a look at the Shattered Realm 80 run.